Imagine starting life as a baker in a small Italian village and ending it as one of the most celebrated violin makers of the 20th century. That is the unlikely journey of Annibale Fagnola, a self-taught craftsman who transformed the Turin school of violin making and left behind instruments that musicians and collectors still compete for today.
Welcome back to Stradivarius and Beyond, where we explore the untold stories of Italian violin makers. I'm Luan Amorim, and in this short episode, we look at Annibale Fagnola, a man who rose from obscurity to become the defining voice of modern touring violin making.
Fagnola was born in 1865 in Montiglio Monferrato, the eldest of 8 children. He was trained as a baker, but music pulled him in another direction. He played the guitar, he built small instruments, his hands meant for dough found their true calling in wood. His early life was humble. The Fagnola family lived in a small district called Regione Convento. His father was a farmer and the family was far from wealthy, but Montiglio was a lively place. Music filled its streets and churches. Woodworkers were common. It's likely here, surrounded by craftsmen and amateur musicians, that Fagnola first picked up a chisel and began experimenting, building guitars and perhaps even repairing instruments for locals. When he moved to Turin in 1894, the city was becoming a hub of violin making. Fagnola worked by day as a baker and by night quietly, persistently shaped his first violins. By 1897, his instruments were already recognizable, showing a natural gift for design and craftsmanship. Turin, in the late 19th century, was a city in flux. Once the first capital of unified Italy, it had become an industrial and cultural hub. Trains, factories, and modern commerce transformed its skyline, but its heart still beat with music. This was the Italy of Verdi and Puccini, of crowded opera houses and flourishing conservatories. The violin was central not just to orchestras, but to chamber salons, folk traditions, and rising soloists. A violinist's tone was their signature, and the right instrument could make or break a career. Yet for all this demand, the great violin-making dynasties had faded. The Cremonese giants, Stradivari, Guarneri, Amati, were long gone. In Piemonte, their legacy lived on through makers like Pressenda and Rocca. By the time Fagnola arrived in Turin, that torch was flickering. The Guadagnini family was nearing its end. A new generation of luthiers was needed to carry Italian violin making into the 20th century.
Unlike many of his contemporaries, Fagnola never apprenticed with a master. He was self-taught, yet remarkably confident. He drew inspiration from Giovanni Francesco Pressenda, Giuseppe Rocca, and Guadagnini, but always reinterpreted their models with his own vision.
The myth of an apprenticeship lingered for years. Some believed he learned from Francesco Guadagnini or other Turin masters, but documents prove otherwise. When Fagnola arrived in Turin, he had no formal training. He registered as a mechanic, possibly to secure work in a growing industrial city. But by 1895, just a year later, he officially declared himself a maker of musical instruments. The transition was quick, almost too quick for someone without talent. It's likely Fagnola had already taught himself the basics in Montiglio. He may have used leftover wood from furniture makers or studied old instruments from amateur musicians. His first known work, a guitar dated 1898, shows both ambition and naivety, but also a clear spark of talent. Fagnola's violins are instantly recognizable. The F-holes, slightly flared and expressive. The scrolls, powerfully carved with a natural sense of movement and proportion. The purfling, fine and precisely inlaid. And his varnish, perhaps his most celebrated feature, ranges from soft golden hues to a vibrant, transparent red, often applied in a smooth, glowing layer over a warm ground and sometimes showing a gentle craquelure that enhances the instrument's visual depth. They are not strict copies, but modern interpretations. Classical elegance blended with bold style. In time, his style matured. He began gravitating toward the models of Pressenda and Rocca, makers rooted in Piemontese tradition. But unlike them, Fagnola was never a strict follower. He saw their work not as blueprints, but as inspiration. His violins came in two forms: inspired models, which added his personal flair, and copies, near-perfect recreations down to the wear and patina. By the early 20th century, Fagnola had become one of Turin's most sought-after makers. His instruments traveled far, winning medals at international exhibitions. By the 1920s and 30s, he was recognized not only in Italy but across Europe as a benchmark of modern violin making. And after the Guadagnini dynasty ended, he emerged as the undisputed leading figure of the Turin school. That rise was helped in part by a collector and mentor, Orazio Ruggiero. Ruggiero introduced Fagnola to rare instruments and offered both feedback and financial support. Their friendship defined Fagnola's early violin work. In fact, one label from 1905 reads, "As ordered by Sir Orazio Ruggiero, Doctor of Law." In 1911, at the Universal Exhibition of Turin, Fagnola won gold for a string quartet he exhibited. From there, his instruments spread across Europe and even reached Japan and the United States, praised for their tone, character, and visual beauty. Fagnola's personal life was filled with turns. He married twice. His second wife, Elvira, was younger and ambitious. They ran a thriving workshop together in the 1920s. In 1921, he had a son, Roberto, and dreamed of passing on the craft. He even built him a half-size violin, but Roberto never took up the trade, and after Fagnola's death, the family struggled to keep the business alive. Still, Fagnola trained several students, Riccardo Genovese, Annibale Fagnola, and Stefano Fasciolo. His workshop became a small school, echoing the dynasties of classical Cremona.
Fagnola passed away in 1939, leaving behind violins, a few violas, and even fewer cellos. His instruments remain a benchmark of the modern Italian school and prized for their clarity, power, and striking beauty. For musicians, they are reliable and brilliant. For collectors and investors, they represented one of the most secure names of the 20th century.
His copies of Pressenda, Rocca, and Guadagnini fooled even expert dealers. But it was no deception. Fagnola saw imitation as a form of reverence, a way to prove he belonged in the lineage of great Italian makers. Annibale Fagnola's story is a reminder that greatness doesn't always follow the traditional path. From a bakery in Monferrato to the concert stages of the world, his violins continue to speak with a voice both modern and timeless.
And this is only one of the many untold stories. Stay with us, because the history of violin making is far richer and far more surprising than you might imagine. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Fagnola's world, subscribe to Stradivarius and Beyond, share this episode with a musician or collector, and tell us in the comments, which hidden master should we uncover next?